The series begins by introducing us to a big Chinese comic company called Manco. Inside this company, there's a young comic artist named Qi Nian, who came pretty close to getting fired. Qi Nian is a 24-year-old woman, and she goes by the pen name Qi Zai. While she's really skilled at drawing, she struggles with storytelling, especially when it comes to love stories. Her latest comic didn't go too well. It ended with the main characters arguing, and that got her a bunch of bad reviews. During a meeting, Qi Nian's boss gave her an ultimatum. He basically said that if she didn't change things up in her next work, her career as a comic artist at Manco would be over. So, after the meeting, she went back to her desk and met her editor, Xin Si. Xin Si, the editor, asked Qi Nian about her plans for her next project. With confidence, she quickly showed Xin Si a sketch of her work. However, Xin Si was surprised because Qi Nian didn't quite grasp the idea of creating something touching. Instead, she drew a scene with characters fighting. In fact, she was already thinking of a name for her new work. Xin Si then explained that Qi Nian needed to make comics with romantic love stories to sell well. She also hoped that Qi Nian could create a story that would make readers' hearts race. After that, Xin Si advised Qi Nian to read many romantic youth comics, while reminding her that this month's selection of new works might be her last chance. A little while later, Qi Nian was outside her office, busy sketching a heart. Soon after, she was approached by a dog named Kaibawu, which made her happy because the dog shared her name. She intended to return Kaibawu to its owner. However, the energetic Kaibawu tugged at her and led her to the riverbank to meet his owner. At that time, she was taken aback when she saw that Kaibawu's owner was extremely handsome. Unexpectedly, Kaibawu misbehaved, causing Qi Nian and his owner to stumble and accidentally kiss. At that moment, she felt her heart race as the man kissed her. Later on, Qi Nian returned to her office, feeling enthusiastic about working on her project because she had just been inspired. Xin Si was surprised after reading Qi Nian's latest comic and was curious about how she came up with the idea. Qi Nian honestly admitted that it was her own story. She also planned to use the man who owned Kaibawu as a model in her new work. Therefore, she began searching for the man, even looking online. The following day, Qi Nian received a tip to search for the man at Chengming University. Long story short, she ended up at Chengming University and pretended to be a student. There, she asked around about the man's characteristics and was directed to the architecture department class. Eventually, she succeeded in finding the man she was looking for. His name was Yansen, and he was a professor. Yansen was also a guest lecturer at Chengming University every new academic year. Apart from being a professor, Yansen was incredibly strict and handsome, which attracted a lot of female students to his class every time he taught. He also had an architectural services office called Yannian Office. Overall, he seemed like the perfect character for a comic. However, he had a weakness cause he struggled to remember people's names and relied on facial recognition apps to recognize people. During his classes, Yansen always challenged his students to open a wooden box he held. If anyone managed to open it, he would grant them a wish. So far, no student had succeeded in this challenge. Surprisingly, Qi Nian managed to open the intricate wooden puzzle box. Yansen then called her to his office, where he recognized her as the girl he had met by the riverbank. Yansen checked Qi Nian's notebook and saw a sketch of himself. He asked what Qi Nian wanted as a reward for opening the puzzle box. She replied that she simply wanted to be near Yansen so she could observe him. Upon hearing this, he suspected that Qi Nian wanted to be his assistant, and he agreed. A little while later, Qi Nian returned to her office and Xin Si seemed pleased with Qi Nian's progress, as she had finally succeeded in creating a romantic love story. The following day, Qi Nian began her job as Yansen's assistant on campus. Yansen explained all of Qi Nian's tasks for the week. In that moment, she was surprised to see that her to-do list only covered a week. Yansen clarified that he would only employ Qi Nian for a week. However, she protested and asked why he used her student number instead of her name. Yansen explained that if he managed to remember her name within 7 days, then she could continue as his assistant. Some time later, Yansen was walking alone when he noticed some students taking photos of him. Soon after, he approached them and confiscated their camera. Later, Yansen checked the photos on the camera, and when asked about the girl in one of the photos, he unexpectedly said the name Qi Nian, surprising himself. The following day, Qi Nian was determined to make sure Yansen remembered her name within 7 days. She wore t-shirts with her name on them and wrote her name whenever she could. Unfortunately, none of her methods seemed to work, and Yansen still couldn't remember her name. While in his office, Yansen confronted Kdrama and asked her why she was so persistent in wanting to be his assistant. She admitted that she had fallen in love with Yansen since their first meeting, and that she genuinely needed him for some reason. However, he didn't fully trust her, as he believed she expressed her feelings too easily and suspected she might have ulterior motives. Not long after, Yansen's grandfather, Yan-Hu, appeared, and he also mistook Kdrama for a new student. Upon hearing this, Yan-Hu advised her not to get into a relationship and to focus on her studies. This actually offended Kdrama, and she promptly showed her ID card. Surprisingly, Yan-Hu noticed that Kdrama was a Taurus, while Yansen was a Capricorn, and he believed that they were compatible. Turns out Yan-Hu was quite the astrology enthusiast and tried to connect the dots between their zodiac signs to gauge their compatibility. Yansen then asked his grandfather why he had come to meet him. Yan-Hu explained that he intended to set up another blind date for Yansen, but he would back off if Yansen already had a girlfriend. Unexpectedly, Yansen glanced at Kdrama and claimed that she was his girlfriend, which brought a joyful smile to her face. However, Yan-Hu remained skeptical, as Yansen had previously avoided the topic. He then quizzed Yansen about his supposed girlfriend's name. Finally, Yansen smoothly uttered the name as Kdrama, making her even happier because she had succeeded in making Yansen remember her name. Yan-Hu then left Yansen's office, leaving the two together. The next day, Kdrama returned to her office, but received criticism from Sin Stai, because her comic's storyline came across more like a stalker's story with no romantic elements. When Kdrama got back home, she discovered that her roommate was actually a guy, Kdrama, who she had always thought was a girl. Turns out Kdrama was a well-known amateur comic artist among teenage comic enthusiasts. Then, Kdrama asked for his help in evaluating her work, and to her surprise, Kdrama agreed with Sin Stai, saying that her work lacked a romantic love story vibe. At that time, Kdrama concluded that Kdrama's imagination was limited and advised her to immerse herself in the story by placing herself in it. He explained that readers should feel her emotions even though the story is fiction. He also gave her tips on how to catch the main character's attention in the real world, like dressing attractively, acting vulnerable, and confessing love romantically. Unfortunately, Kdrama felt hopeless because none of the tips worked when she tried to approach Yansen, who was the model for her latest story. Eventually, he discovered that Kdrama wasn't a female student, and she admitted to lying and resigned, leaving her employee card and the tasks he had assigned her. Despite this, Kdrama still wished to be close to Yansen. As she was about to leave campus, it started raining. Shortly after, Sin Stai called and informed her that the company's new work selection schedule had been moved up. Hearing this, Kdrama rushed back home in the rain. Meanwhile, Yansen, seeing the rain, began to worry about Kdrama. A little later, Kdrama got back home and immediately opened her laptop. She was in such a hurry that she didn't even have time to dry herself off properly cause she had to finish her comic. The next morning, Kdrama collapsed from a high fever. At that moment, Kdrama planned to take her to the hospital, but she refused because she hadn't finished her comic yet. Kdrama felt sorry for her and offered to help. Meanwhile, Yansen was getting ready for a seminar but felt disappointed because Kdrama was no longer his assistant. Unexpectedly, he ran into a problem with the presentation materials on the USB that Kdrama had prepared, and his new assistant didn't have a backup file. Back at home, Kdrama and Kdrama were working hard to finish the comic. There, she felt optimistic about completing it in the afternoon and decided to take a short break to check her phone, which she hadn't touched since yesterday. She was shocked to see many missed calls from Yansen. After learning about the issue, she rushed to meet Yansen in time. Fortunately, she arrived on time, handed over her USB, and urged him to hurry. But as Kdrama turned to leave, she fainted once more. Some time later, Kdrama woke up and was surprised to find herself in the hospital, with Yansen by her side. Shortly after, Yansen's new assistant contacted her, and she noticed that Yansen seemed worried for the first time. Yansen was even willing to leave his seminar to take her to the hospital. Upon hearing this, Kdrama expressed regret for being careless and not preparing a backup file, causing Yansen to miss an important seminar. However, he praised her for continuing to deliver files despite having a high fever. From that moment on, Yansen began to trust Kdrama more. While waiting for the bus home from the hospital, She suddenly felt her heart beating faster. She noticed a comic poster titled "Flowers and Romance" at the bus stop, with words suggesting that when the heart beats, it's the beginning of love. Not long after, Kdrama received information that confessing love at 5:20 on the clock is likely to lead to a successful love story. So she bravely confessed her love to Yansen once again. However, Yansen replied that he wasn't currently interested in romantic affairs. Despite this, Kdrama didn't want to give up and hoped that Yansen would give her more time to get closer to him. Later on, Kdrama returned to her office. Initially, she thought she hadn't managed to finish the comic in time. However, she was surprised when Sin-si praised her latest comic because she had sent it on time, even an hour earlier than the deadline. At that time, Kdrama was shocked and realized that it was thanks to Ki-jing's help. At the same time, Sin-si also delivered good news, mentioning that Kdrama's work had been selected as a new release for the next month. After hearing all of the good news, Sin-si invited Kdrama to a cafe to celebrate her success. While at the cafe, Kdrama felt a bit sad because she thought she might not see Yansen again, as she was no longer his assistant. But then she got excited because it seemed like Yansen didn't mind if she continued to approach him. Long story short, Kdrama arrived at Yansen's office and was immediately assigned to deliver documents. She also resumed her role as Yansen's assistant at his home, where they were no longer on campus. Then Yansen asked her to call him master. There, he set 3 rules for her before working at his house. Firstly, Kdrama couldn't disturb Yansen while he was working. Secondly, she couldn't enter restricted areas in the house. Finally, she couldn't stay overnight, and if she had to, she must stay in the guest room. Breaking any of these rules would result in immediate termination. When Kdrama asked about the Forbidden Room's location, Yansen informed her. Later on, Kdrama returned home and showed Ki-jing the progress of her comic story. However, he was moved by the story, but felt that the male main character's attitude seemed very cold. As time passed, Kdrama continued to work at Yansen's house, allowing her to better understand his attitudes and behaviors. She also grew curious about the Forbidden Room, and noticed that whenever Yansen was in a bad mood, he would retreat to that room. After leaving the Forbidden Room, his mood would quickly improve. Then, when she got back home, Kdrama tried to convince Ki-jing to help her complete the comic she was working on. Initially, Ki-jing refused, saying he had no talent. But then he recalled his childhood when he shared his dream of becoming a comic artist with his older brother, who opposed it. However, Kdrama explained that among the sketches he had submitted to the editor, the one drawn by Ki-jing had received the highest praise. She also invited him to join a competition for a new work selection. The following day, Yansen headed off to work. Surprisingly, he asked Kdrama to look after the house and hold onto the keys. Meanwhile, Ki-jing had lost his ID card and had to contact his older brother for help. A little later, while Kdrama was at home, she heard a ringing phone from the Forbidden Room. Worried it might be an important call, she entered the Forbidden Room and answered it. Unexpectedly, Yansen returned home and caught Kdrama breaking the rules. He was furious and decided to expel her, firing her from her job. Later at home, Kdrama and Ki-jing were busy brainstorming titles for their new comic. After some thought, they settled on the title The Natural Beauty of the Girl, with Mr. G and Siochi as the main characters. Unfortunately, Kdrama had been fired by Yansen, so she tried to gather story ideas by understanding Yansen's character through a game character. Some time later, Kdrama received a call from Yansen's new assistant, asking her to return immediately because Yansen was ill. Soon after, she rushed over, but after playing games for 3 days straight, she still thought she was in the game and believed that Yansen in front of her was just a game character. At that time, Yansen was surprised by Kdrama's persistence and told her to go home. However, she refused to leave and said Yansen could punish her however he wanted as long as he didn't fire her again. After receiving the cold shoulder from Yansen, Kdrama finally realized she wasn't in a game anymore. She confessed that she liked the real Yansen more than the game version. Seeing her sincerity, Yansen accepted her apology and asked her not to repeat her mistakes. The next day, Kdrama continued to care for Yansen, who had a fever. When Ki-jing called, she accidentally dropped Yansen's medicine, waking him up. Yansen, curious about who Kdrama was talking to, took her phone, but luckily, Ki-jing hung up. Later, Yansen asked Kdrama to accompany him to an event the next day. They attended the bookstore's inauguration, designed by Yansen, but he was annoyed because he had to wear a clown costume. However, Yansen had mistakenly taken the wrong medicine, thinking it was a fever reducer when it was actually a sleep aid. At that time, he became very drowsy, so Kdrama took him to the top floor of the building to find a place for him to lie down. Then, Yansen asked her to talk about herself to help him stay awake. Once the event ended, Yansen instructed Kdrama to head home first. Meanwhile, at Yansen's house, Kdrama discovered the sleeping pills Yansen had taken. There, she learned that the pills helped with anxiety and sleep disorders. On the other hand, Yansen finally reunited with his long-lost younger brother, Kdrama. There, he provided family documents to help Kdrama with his identity card. They discussed Kdrama's job at a comics company called Wrongpin. Shortly after, Yansen expressed annoyance because Kdrama still pursued his hobby of making comics. In response, Kdrama showed his employment contract, but Yansen challenged him to achieve success within a year. If Kdrama succeeded, Yansen would support him or otherwise. Kdrama needed to accept reality and work with Yansen. Soon after, Yansen returned home to find Kdrama asleep on the sofa, waiting for him. He moved her to the guest room. In the middle of the night, Kdrama woke up to find Yansen sleeping next to him. Confused, she thought she had entered the wrong room. But after inspecting it, she realized it was the guest room. Then, Yansen briefly woke up and hugged Kdrama before returning to his room, revealing he was sleepwalking. As time passed, Kdrama grew weary from staying up all night to watch over Yansen. There were times when she had to rescue him from dangerous situations when his sleepwalking recurred. Surprisingly, Kdrama also found an advantage in Yansen's condition. During these episodes, Yansen would follow her instructions, even allowing hugs and kisses to help her with the sketches she needed. In that moment, Kdrama understood that the real Yansen would not be as gentle. She couldn't act as freely when he was awake. On the flip side, Yansen received a call from his source, informing him that Kdrama had been deceived by the Wrongpin company. Soon after, Yansen hurried to find Kdrama by the river. There, he reminded Kdrama of the promise he had made to work in his office. Meanwhile, the employees at Manco were overjoyed because Kdrama's comic quickly became the top-ranked comic with an unprecedented number of readers on its first day. It even broke previous records for comic artists. Shortly after, Kdrama eagerly contacted Kdrama, urging him to come to Manco and prepare to become a professional comic artist. However, Yansen was irritated, as he had nearly convinced Kdrama to work with him. Then he snatched Kdrama's phone and argued with her, not realizing he was actually arguing with her. But then, Kdrama took back his phone and rushed to Manco. There he met Sinxi, who offered him a writing contract. Kdrama wanted Kdrama to be her writing partner, not just her assistant. However, Kdrama was taken aback when he learned that Mr. G in Kdrama's comic was based on her real boss, and the story was about his life. Some time later, Kdrama returned to work at Yansen's house, but she was in for a surprise when she saw Yansen fall off the bed after taking his medicine. While helping him, she accidentally came across his notebook about his sleepwalking problem. In the process, he unexpectedly kissed her. Soon after, Yansen woke up, realizing that Kdrama had known about his condition all along. Shortly after that, Kdrama came to pick up Kdrama to take her home. At that time, Yansen felt a pang of jealousy seeing Kdrama with another man. But to his astonishment, he realized that the man was Kdrama, someone he also knew. There, Kdrama took Kdrama for a walk to thank her for saving his life and explained how he had almost entrusted his fate to Yansen. Turns out they had a pleasant evening, unaware that Yansen was secretly following them. Eventually, Yansen discovered that Kdrama lived in the same house as Kdrama. He jumped to the conclusion that they were dating, which only fueled his jealousy. So he sent an email to Kdrama with a list of tasks to be completed within 30 minutes, summoning her back to his house. After sending the email, Yansen hurried back home to avoid arousing Kdrama's suspicion. In short, when Kdrama arrived, she was out of breath and was assigned a seemingly important task, which turned out to be nothing more than sharpening pencils. However, Kdrama managed to avoid it. Afterward, Yansen honestly told Kdrama that his sleepwalking was an old issue that occasionally resurfaced. He also inquired why she had taken so long to answer the phone. Kdrama explained that she had gone for a walk with her housemates to celebrate something. She clarified that one of her housemates was a friend she shared the rent with. This explanation put Yansen at ease. The following day, Kdrama attended the monthly meeting agenda in Manka. Thanks to the success of the comic, her colleagues at the office no longer underestimated her. In the evening, while cleaning the pool at Yansen's house, Kdrama got lost in thought and accidentally fell into the pool, soaking her clothes. Fortunately, Yansen offered her a t-shirt to wear, but Kdrama didn't realize that the t-shirt actually belonged to Kdrama. She also assumed that Yansen was a fan of anime movies. However, Yansen soon snapped out of his thoughts and denied Kdrama's assumptions. He explained that there was no point in liking things like comics and anime. This annoyed Kdrama, and she pointed out that she knew Yansen liked and collected fairy tale comics. Kdrama went on to explain that one night, Yansen had a relapse and took her into a forbidden room. Inside, she discovered a vast collection of comics and action figures, including a complete set of fairy tale action figures. Yansen was surprised to hear Kdrama's revelation, but he wasn't angry because he had been the one to share the secret with her in the first place. Then he asked her to accompany him on a work trip out of town. During their trip, Kdrama convinced Yansen to take a break and watch a fireworks display with her. Initially, Yansen hesitated due to his busy schedule, but he eventually read Kdrama's social media post about her desire to see the fireworks and bought tickets for the show. Afterward, he asked Kdrama to go somewhere. Surprisingly, Yansen invited her to an amusement park to enjoy the fireworks, and his behavior was remarkably attentive throughout dinner. When Kdrama wanted to have wine, Yansen advised her not to drink too much, but she ended up getting drunk and asked about Yansen's illness. Eventually, she learned that his illness was related to missing someone. Kdrama also dared to ask who held Yansen's heart, and this conversation continued on a merry-go-round ride. She asked various questions, such as whether the woman was his ex-girlfriend, if he loved her, and if the woman was beautiful. Finally, she inquired whether Yansen missed that woman greatly. To her surprise, Yansen replied that he didn't need to miss the woman who had his heart, because she was right there with him. He confessed his love and kissed Kdrama. The next day, Yansen, Kdrama, and Kdrama found themselves together due to an incident. Kdrama realized that the reason Yansen had been the inspiration for the main male character in her comics. However, she quickly signaled to Kdrama to keep her identity a secret from Yansen. Shortly after, Yansen received a call about their grandfather being in the hospital. Long story short, they all ended up at the hospital. Kdrama looked sad seeing their grandfather's condition and promised to reconcile with Yansen and live together. The condition was that Kdrama must also live with them. In the end, Kdrama had to be patient because Yansen and Kdrama were very different in many ways, from their personalities to their food preferences. Kdrama loved sweet food, while Yansen preferred salty dishes. Sometime later, Kdrama was seen helping Kdrama with the laundry. He complained about being tired of living with Yansen. Initially, their relationship with Yansen had been very harmonious, even though Yansen had to study diligently due to their strict parents. Yansen spent long hours in the study room, obeying their father's orders. However, Yansen remained kind and loved Kdrama. Unfortunately, things changed when Yansen was 12 years old, as their parents divorced. Their mom went to the United States and their dad disappeared. They both moved to their grandfather's house, and Yansen's behavior began to resemble their father's. They eventually had a major argument, leading to Kdrama leaving for the United States with their mother. After sharing this story, Kdrama left in anger, surprising Kdrama because of his emotional state that day. Shortly after, Yansen approached Kdrama and revealed that it was actually Kdrama's birthday. Kdrama then suggested they prepare a birthday party for Kdrama. Meanwhile, Kdrama was lost in thought, recalling his 16th birthday. Back then, Yansen appeared upset because he received a school report stating that Kdrama had been in a fight. At that time, Yansen scolded Kdrama without wanting to hear his explanation, even though Kdrama had been forced into the fight by bullies. Kdrama didn't want to just accept the blame and argued with Yansen. He even said he didn't mind getting expelled from school because he wanted to become a comic artist. This only made Yansen more irritated, and he suggested that Kdrama study management or architecture instead. But Kdrama refused to follow Yansen's orders, which angered Yansen further, leading to him destroying Kdrama's action figure collection. Since that incident, Kdrama had been hurt by Yansen's treatment and had chosen to run away from home. When he returned, he was surprised to find Kdrama preparing a surprise for him. However, Kdrama accidentally mentioned that Yansen had also helped with the surprise, which made Qi Jing angry and prompted him to leave. Qi Jing ended up at the hospital to visit his grandfather, where he unexpectedly ran into Yansen. For the first time, Yansen apologized to Qi Jing. This led Qi Jing to return home and search for the gift from Yansen that he had discarded earlier. Then he found a photo of a large wooden cupboard, which was located in a forbidden room. When he opened the cupboard, he was amazed to find all of his destroyed collections perfectly preserved inside. Long story short, Yan Hu has recovered and returned home. He then suggested to Yansen that they should invite Qi Nian to have a meal with their extended family. Finally, the relationship between Yansen and Qi Jing slowly started to improve. Later on, Qi Nian received an invitation to join Yansen's extended family for a camping trip. She was determined to use her charm to win Yansen's heart and dressed in feminine clothes as they walked along the beach. Just when Qi Nian was making progress with Yansen, her clothes accidentally tore. Nevertheless, Qi Nian didn't give up and playfully teased Yansen by wearing a bikini, though she was actually wearing a t-shirt with a bikini design. After that, Yansen and Qi Nian were roped into playing the coin bracelet game by Yan Wei. There, Yan Wei explained that they both had to wear bracelets and had to unlock them within 24 hours. The catch was that the bracelets could only be automatically unlocked if the wearers stayed close together, making the countdown timer decrease rapidly. If they separated by more than 1 meter, the bracelets would sound an alarm, and the timer would increase. Besides that, the bracelets monitored their heartbeats, and if their heart rates increased, the timer would decrease even faster. Upon hearing the explanation, Yansen surprised everyone by inviting Qi Nian to run along the beach. This exhausted her, so she suggested a lighter activity, but Yansen still seemed to miss the point of the bracelet game. However, this frustrated Qi Nian, and to make things worse, she injured her leg. Then, Yansen immediately took her to the tent. Inside the tent, Yansen made a move, and Qi Nian finally understood the true meaning of his words. They shared a kiss, and their bracelets automatically opened. Afterward, he instructed her to rest. During the night, Qi Nian woke up and overheard Yansen and Yan Wei discussing their relationship progress. Yan Wei asked about it, and Yansen explained that he didn't like when Qi Nian forced her feelings. He added that he wouldn't hold back if he genuinely liked someone. However, he also made it clear that he wouldn't be with someone who had secrets or hid things from him. If a woman close to him couldn't be honest, he wouldn't hesitate to walk away. At that time, Qi Nian realized that Yansen's words were directed at her. However, Qi Nian had doubts about the actions she shared with Yansen. She couldn't help but think that maybe it was all just her imagination. You see, Qi Nian often daydreamed about Yansen because she was convinced he would never reciprocate her love. Those romantic scenes in her comics were her way of expressing her feelings. But Yansen reassured her that what they were experiencing was real, not just her imagination. Yansen then began doing things that had previously only existed in Qi Nian's comics. He carried her, broke into her room, and invited her for a romantic moment, though it got interrupted because she felt hungry. Yansen later asked Qi Nian out on a date after they had dinner together. When they got home, he wanted to hear how Qi Nian became a comic artist. She explained that back in high school, she met a man named Seoli and a female editor named Lu Qingwu. They'd offered her the opportunity to start her professional career as a comic artist, and that's how it all began. After observing both Qi Nian's strengths and weaknesses, Seoli suggested that if they collaborated, they would achieve great success. Feeling confident, Qingwu invited Qi Nian to work together. To mark their debut, they combined their names and created the pen name as KXI. Some time later, Qingwu informed them that their first work would soon be officially published. Unfortunately, Qi Nian had to focus on preparing for the college entrance exam and wouldn't be able to spend much time online. But there, Seoli assured Qi Nian that she would wait until after the exam. Eventually, Qi Nian's first comic became the most successful work of the year. KXI was recognized as the best newcomer and won an award. However, at the award ceremony, only Seoli received recognition, and to Qi Nian's surprise, she claimed to have created the comic all by herself. At that time, Qi Nian noticed something odd going on between Seoli and Qingwu. A while back, she met Qingwu to show him the final sketch of her comic. She also mentioned that she would be preparing for the national exam and might be less active online for a month, asking him to log into their KXI account. Surprisingly, Qingwu spilled water on her laptop and promised to replace it with a new one. After seeing an announcement, Nyan realized that she hadn't checked her account in a while and didn't know that her name had been removed. She also discovered that her old laptop had been deliberately damaged, likely to prevent her from accessing the original sketches of her comics. Besides that, Xiaoli changed the password for the Kyaxai account, making it difficult for Nyan to prove her authorship. When Nyan tried to upload original sketches to defend herself, she faced a barrage of slander and insults. She even got involved in a comic fan forum where they accused her of plagiarizing Xiaoli's work. This damaged Nyan's reputation as a writer and comic artist. Fortunately, Manco publishers still accepted her work, but she decided to change her drawing style and create a new pen name. She also ventured into the youth comic genre, despite having no prior experience. Her new work, The Nature Beauty of the Girl, gained popularity in Rongpin culture. Manco's rival wanted to recruit her. Interestingly, the chief editor at Rongpin turned out to be Xiaoli. Eventually, Xiaoli and Nyan crossed paths again, but this time Nyan refused to work with her, having learned from her previous experience. Long story short, Jiang found out that Yansen and Nyan were officially a couple. This left him feeling all confused and sad because he also had feelings for Nyan. This whole situation started to affect his comics, the way he drew them. In the end, Nyan noticed that Jiang's performance was going downhill and told him to stop being her assistant. It might sound tough, but Nyan thought it was for the best so that Jiang could grow. Plus, she didn't want him to suffer drawing the story of her and Yansen, who had just started dating. A while later, Yansen gave Nyan an apartment. But here's the thing, Yansen had set up a special studio for Nyan, so she could focus on her drawings. Over time, her comics became super popular, and they were even planning to make a live-action version. Everyone at Manco was excited about it, including Nyan. They talked about how the news of the drama, based on Nyan's comics, got an awesome response from fans, and turns out the drama had some famous Chinese actors and actresses in it. After a while, Nyan's comics became super popular, but that led to some problems. People on fan forums started spreading rumors, saying that Nyan's work was fake, and the main male character was just made up. It made her really sad, as it reminded her of a past conflict with Xiaoli. Luckily, Yansen was always there to support and cheer her up. The next day, Nyan had an important event, an autograph session and a fan meeting. She was quite nervous because of the rumors from the day before. She worried that the event might be quiet, but turns out many fans showed up, and during the queue and a session, some asked if the male main character was real. Nyan explained that the comic was based on her real experiences in pursuing the male lead, and that the rumors were false. The fans were eager to see the male character Mr. G in real life, and then Yansen showed up. Fans recognized him as Mr. G from the comics, and he introduced himself, making the event a big success. Now, let's switch scenes to meet Bao, a clever 5-year-old male golden retriever. The smart dog was Yansen's best buddy, and stuck with him all the time before he met Nyan. Interestingly, Bao played a role in bringing Yansen and Nyan together for the first time. Thanks to Bao, Nyan accidentally kissed Yansen during their first meeting, and it gave her a big inspiration that changed her life. Yansen cared a lot for Bao, and he made sure that Bao liked her potential life partners. He even got rid of women who couldn't get along with Bao. Nyan loved Bao too, but sometimes she got a little jealous because Yansen spoiled the dog more than her. But there were sad times too, like when Nyan had to leave Yansen's house. Now, Bao is thrilled to see Yansen and Nyan back together. Some time later, Nyan and Yansen were alone, and Yansen expressed her desire to be with Nyan forever. She hoped Nyan would be more open and not hesitate to ask for her help. As time passed, Nyan's comics became more and more popular, and this led to her own popularity too. Several good-looking guys tried to get close to her. It all started with Jinju, her old high school senior, who had now become a famous idol in China. Then, there was the actor who played Mr. G in the TV series based on her comic. Even Yansen, who felt a bit jealous when he saw Nyan with other men, worried that his position might be in danger. So he decided to visit Nyan's hometown to seek her parents' blessings. Surprisingly, Yansen asked Nyan to bring her personal documents and took her to the marriage registration office. This caught Nyan off guard. Not that she didn't want to get married, but the whole process felt too rushed. Plus, she hadn't even told her parents yet. Coincidentally, her mom called her at that moment and ended up chatting warmly with Yansen. In fact, her mother congratulated her on the marriage right away. At that time, Kdrama was puzzled, wondering how could her mom not angry or suspicious about her sudden marriage. It turned out that her mom had been watching a fan meeting and had seen Yansen, which made her quite pleased that her daughter had found such a handsome and good man. A little while later, Kdrama and Yansen went to visit Yanhu to share the news of their marriage. At that time, Kdrama was worried that Yanhu might get upset about their sudden wedding. However, Yansen remained calm and even joked that he was more afraid his grandfather would be so happy that he'd faint. After receiving blessings from both families, Kdrama went back to work on her comics at Manso Publishing House. She was busy finishing the ending of her comic, which mirrored her own story. Soon after, her colleagues congratulated her and eagerly anticipated her next work, which would be about life after marriage. Long story short, Kdrama found herself in her wedding dress one day. It turned out that Yansen had wanted to marry her for a long time, and he proposed to her not long after, leading to their wedding ceremony. Now, let's take a trip back to 2009. Yansen, back then, wrote down his wish on a board, hoping for a happy family. He placed his wish board close to another board, but he got scolded by a man who said he hung it in the wrong spot. Yansen had mistakenly put his wish board where people wished for marriage. The man turned out to be none other than Kdrama's father. There, Yansen thanked him and was about to leave when Kdrama's father noticed Yansen's name on his wish board. He secretly hoped Yansen would become his son-in-law. Meanwhile, Kdrama came to show her father a sketch she'd made of a man's face. When her father asked who the man in the sketch was, she pointed to Yansen, who had just been talking to her father. Now, fast forward to the present. The twist of fate finally brought Yansen and Kdrama back together, and the series ends. The moral lesson from this series is when you try to impress the love of your life, make sure you're wearing a real bikini, not just a t-shirt with a bikini design.